Platinumgames is a studio that was established with some of the best talent from Capcom. Many of these developers were responsible for large series like Resident Evil and Devil May Cry, while also making delightful games with unique experiences like Beautiful Joe and Okami. Platinumgames had the foundation to make great new experiences, and through the years their work is a great representation of that quality. While Bayonetta 1 did not sell as well as they had hoped, it created a devoted fan base, and Platinum looked to Nintendo to continue making entries within that franchise. Platinum has only continued to make quality experiences, and we saw that when they created a sequel to the underrated Nier. And while they have an impressive catalog of games, one of their earlier titles stands out for its uniqueness and it's beloved by many. Vanquish took a third-person shooter and added a lot of style, flash, and fun that one would only find in a high-quality Platinum game. I present to you a look back at Vanquish. Platinumgames was founded in 2006. There was a lot of excitement with this company as it featured many talented people behind many of Capcom's beloved series. Platinumgames was a powerhouse of talent with developers that had the experience with making so many great games. Their first game was Mad World, released on the Wii console. Mad World had a great visual style and violent combat. Their second game was being helmed by the creator of Devil May Cry, and he was looking to make a spiritual successor to his successful series. Bayonetta launched at the beginning of 2010 and fully captured any player that got their hands on it. If Mad World was proof that the decision to create Platinumgames was a good idea, Bayonetta cemented it. In 2010, Platinum started the year strong with Bayonetta and ended it with the same level of quality. Shinji Mikami and his team were hard at work developing a new third-person shooter. Mikami was a name that really stood out in the games industry because of his successful work with the Resident Evil franchise, along with being known as the granddad of survival horror. He not only helped to popularize the genre, but also helped to reinvigorate it within its own franchise with Resident Evil 4. But for this new game, he wanted to create a third-person shooter that was in a new setting. In 2007, development on Vanquish began. Vanquish aimed to be a new third-person shooter that stood out from the crowd. While Vanquish was designed to be a third-person shooter, the developers wanted to retain some of those action elements that Platinum was already known for. The visual inspiration was going to come from Japanese anime. Vanquish was going to have a sense of speed that was not seen in third-person shooters at the time. The developers wanted to give the player the ability to zip and move around the levels while also being able to pull off acrobatic moves and take cover when necessary. But safety wasn't just found in the cover like many cover-based shooters. The player's speed was both something that could be used for defense or offensive opportunities. This was seen with the ability to rocket slide around the battlefield, along with being able to go into a reaction mode that slowed everything down and allowed for more precise shooting. The developers built in a risk and reward system with these abilities. Both the boost and the slow-mo will drain a heat meter. If the meter is completely used up, the player is vulnerable, but if the player can use it wisely, the meter will replenish quickly and you can get back into that powerful state. This was intended to create an ebb and flow to the gameplay systems. Within the early stages of Vanquish, the player was going to be in larger environments than what were seen in the final product. The original design was going to have the player moving from enemy position to enemy position on a more open level. While this design is interesting and it would have invited in that feeling of being in a larger conflict, the development team felt like these larger levels would take away from the fast pace that they were aiming for with Vanquish. As a result, the development team settled on a more narrow yet focused pace to their game. QuickTime events were another area that were more dominant in the early stages of the game. This was a mechanic that was seen in many contemporary titles at the time. While the developers used these frequently in Resident Evil 4, through the development of Vanquish, they got sick of this mechanic. As a result, the QuickTime events were toned down for this title. The focus of Vanquish was going to be placed on providing fast-paced action that the player controlled. A large amount of QuickTime events would effectively take control away from the player. The original use of QuickTime events were toned down to be more in line with the vision of the game. Another interesting aspect of development was how the player was originally going to be controlling a robot with the game having no one in the suit. The suit was originally going to be remotely operated, with the robot being operated by different characters and having the ability to change forms. While this wasn't in the game, this definitely makes you wonder if this idea would be used in a potential sequel. The main foes within the game were originally set to be in white armor rather than the red seen in the final product. Mikami originally liked the idea of having these enemies be colored white because it would be like the enemy was trying to camouflage and blend in with all the many white backgrounds. Through feedback from his team, and many testers found that these enemies were hard to identify because they were essentially white armored enemies on a white background. This caused the team to make a collaborative move to change these enemies to the color red so that they really stood out more to the player. Vanquish started as an idea to bring something new to the third-person shooter landscape. At this time, third-person shooters were flooding the market, and many of them focused on cover-to-cover mechanics. And while Vanquish did take this from its contemporaries, they also made it their own and created a combat flow that was only unique to their game. The sense of speed mixed with relentless action created engaging gameplay with memorable encounters. On October 19th, 2010, Vanquish was released to the world. The story starts out with an Earth that has nations fighting for resources. The US launches a space colony that has a solar energy microwave transmitter as a means to provide them with a new resource. This space colony is called the SC-01 Providence. Meanwhile, a Russian military faction called the Order of the Russian Star captures the Providence. The game opens up with the Order of the Russian Star using the solar beam from the Providence on San Francisco. Victor, an agent of the Russian Star, gets in contact with the US and demands that they surrender or the solar beam will be used on New York City. President Winters responds by sending Lieutenant Burns to infiltrate the station along with an army of Marines. In addition, Sam Gideon is recruited to join the mission as well. Sam is a soldier for the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. He is sent in equipped in a new prototype augmented reaction suit, giving him enhanced abilities, with Elena providing him support over the comms.
We believe the operation is being led by a Red known as Zaitsev. Oh yeah, this is Sam. DARPA sent him to come along with us. Men, we've got 8 hours to stop New York from becoming the next San Francisco. Make no mistake, we will stop that from happening.
Sam, I'm not sure if you've noticed, but your new friends don't seem too fond of you.
DARPA operatives take their orders directly from POTUS and SecDef. These guys are just interested in marking their territory.
Before Sam was brought in for the Marine assault, both Sam and Elena are on a mission to stop the Russians from firing the solar beam, along with rescuing the professor who created it. On the ship heading to the Providence, Burns and Sam get acquainted. The Providence is protected by a large amount of Russian forces. Their ship are the only ones that are able to get inside the Providence before the doors close. As the Marines make their initial assault, the Russians attack. Sam and Burns manage to get to the transport ship and make their way to the landing zone. Their transport crash lands and the initial assault begins.
Russians have complete control of this place.
Sam, Burns, and the Marines survive the initial assault. Sam then faces off against several types of Russian forces. While the fighting is fierce, Sam aims to not have needless men die. He tries to save any Marines where he can. They finally meet up with an APC and get some help.
Shove some tungsten up this tunnel's ass!
Roger that.
This colony you won't be walking straight for a while.
Following the tunnels, our group continues to fight the Russian forces. Then Sam catches sight of the professor and makes an attempt to save him.
Professor! Sam! What the hell is that thing? I hate driving.
That will be fun enough.
Zaitsev, what do you want with Candide?
There is much I want from Mr. Candide.
Sam!
Sam fails to save the professor and continues to pursue him. The group uses a tram to get to their target. Sam takes a hold of an enemy transport to take out the air forces. As Sam makes an effort to take out the air forces, Burns' tram is shot down. Sam continues on and meets up with another group of Marines. They face off against two large robots and Burns rejoins Sam. Following this, Sam uses his abilities to take a deadly hill and then the group is stopped by a stronghold. Meanwhile, Victor makes contact with President Winters. This conversation alludes to that these parties were having some sort of collusion related to the Providence takeover, and Victor is not interested in working with President Winters anymore. Back on the Providence, Sam, Burns, and the Marines continue their fight. Sam is tasked with taking out a very large gun blocking their progress. As a result of the fighting, an explosion creates a hole in the space station. The team works to get to shelter and turn on the blast doors. Sam wants to wait on closing the blast doors so more Marines can get to safety, but Burns doesn't care and shuts the doors anyway. It is later revealed that Burns is working with the president. Sam finally catches up with the professor, and the professor is able to stop the sequence for the solar beam to hit New York City, but then Burns shows up.
Stay back! I've told you we can't trust the commander-in-chief. Why are you working with the military?
Frank!
Thank God. I stopped it in time.
Burns! Why? Sorry, Sam. This fight is for the men going home in pine boxes now. I'm changing the microwave's target to Moscow.
Why would the president order this?
Consider it a kind of economic stimulus package.
What? War is not economic stimulus. San Francisco is gone now.
That was for the good of all Americans.
The target can't be reset with this panel, Burns.
You think I don't know that? Besides, I was gonna retarget this thing the old-fashioned way. Manually.
And you expect me to just stand by and watch?
Well, well. You're on a battlefield now, Sammy boy. Let's see you fight for what you believe in.
We learn that Burns aims to target the beam towards Moscow. Sam is able to defeat Burns. Enemy Marines show up and attack Sam. Sam is outgunned with the large force, and Burns uses his last bit of strength to help Sam by opening up an escape route and taking out some of the enemies. Then Sam is attacked by Victor.
Are you kidding me?
Here we learn that President Winters backed the Russian Tsar's takeover of the Russian government. Victor and Sam enter into a final battle. After defeating Victor's drone, Sam finds out that Victor wasn't really in any of those suits and he was just controlling them remotely. Sam discovers that the drones are armed with nukes, and Victor aims to use those nukes to blow up the Providence and not allow anyone else to recapture it. Sam rushes to an escape pod. Victor is still out there and President Winters shoots herself in the head. Sam and Elena safely escape the blast, and this is the story of Vanquish. The story is more of an excuse for the action, but what really makes the story stand out is more related to the outstanding presentation and the action sequences that you get treated to throughout the entire game. These sequences are over the top with a lot going on, and the camera work is excellent. The story and dialogue is charmingly dumb and very cheesy. You can sit here and pick apart the narrative for logical issues, but the story is best enjoyed by having you check your brain at the door. I really enjoyed how the story did combine the plot and dialogue that would fit perfectly in an 80s action movie with the style and awesome action that you would expect out of something from Japan. Sam is a decent enough main character along with Elena. He's likable, gruff, and cocky. Burns is enjoyable every time he is on screen, but I do feel like the villains are rather underdeveloped. These flaws would maybe bother me more in a different context, but here the story never gets in the way of the action, with the cutscenes mainly being used to set up your next encounter, along with showing off some great action sequences. The story is certainly secondary to the gameplay. It is charmingly dumb and very enjoyable. Vanquish is a masterclass in gameplay. Vanquish provides you with a lot of options for both moving and tackling the enemies. You can move and roll to get around the map, along with dodging some attacks. To add to this are the thrusters that are attached to the back of your legs. This turns you into a human missile as you can fly all over the map. When you hit the thruster button, you can feel that power that is pushing you around the map. You also get a nice rush as you are boosting around. Both the thrusters and the cover mechanics are used for your defense. The thrusters use up an energy bar, and if it's all used up, you'll have to wait a bit before you can move around again. At times like this, you will feel vulnerable, and you will need to try to seek out cover to protect yourself until you can get your speed back. Some enemies have attacks that will go through cover, and this is where you need to rely on your speed dash to get out of there. Both the cover and the thrusters assist you in attacking as well. The same bar used for your thrusters can be used to slow down time and allow you to quickly damage many enemies without worrying about being hit. You can go into slow-mo if you choose to aim while you are using your thrusters, if you evade roll and then aim, or if you're behind cover and then leap over it. Like everything else in the game, this looks awesome to pull off and it's extremely useful. Just like with overusing your thrusters, you need to keep in mind how much of your energy bar you exhaust while in combat, because if you use up all of your bar, then you can't go into slow-mo or use your thrusters and you're going to be really vulnerable. The combination of your speed and the slow-mo moves gives you advantages in combat and creates this unique flow that you can only find in Vanquish. A quick use of your slow-mo can give you some moments to assess the battlefield and figure out which enemies to target. The thrusters can give you the ability to continually resituate yourself to be in the best fighting position. But if this power is used too much, then it can be the reason why you are in a tough situation and cause you to die. Generally, games give players that power fantasy feeling, and Vanquish provides one of the best versions of that. Going a bit deeper into it, I love how there's a solid player monitored risk and reward system at play here with the thrusters. This energy bar allows you to move at high speeds and also allows you to go into slow-mo to give you the leg up on your enemies. But if you use it all up, you are extremely vulnerable, and you can continually feel this almost addictive like pull from the game when you're using it. With each combat encounter, you're trying to use this bar the most effective way you can without completely draining it. But the game actively makes the player want to use up the bar because of how satisfying it is to use your abilities. Like I said, Vanquish provides a hyperpower fantasy while also continually teaching the player that this power is available to them, but must be used smartly and not used haphazardly. I found myself dying a lot in my first few areas because I was trying to learn the options the game provided me, along with trying to figure out when to stop using my abilities and not leave myself in a vulnerable state. It should be noted too that if you have energy in your bar and you take enough damage, the suit will automatically drain your energy and put you into a slow-mo state. This sort of acts like a second chance to find cover and recover a bit. Some of the most rewarding aspects about Vanquish is how the game gives the player all the tools they need from the start. You are not really earning new moves throughout the game. In this way, the game shows its hand pretty early. But since the game mostly throws you into combat with all these options, it's up to the player to figure out how to use them and really improve their proficiency throughout the game. For example, the first chapter is where you'll really be in awe of the mechanics and presentation, but you really won't feel comfortable with them. Chapter 2 and 3 is where you start to gain more confidence in your abilities, and this only improves for the rest of the game. It should go without saying, but the shooting in this is really rewarding. Vanquish comes supplied with a good selection of weapons. You have the expected firearms like an assault rifle, heavy machine gun, shotgun, and pistol, but you also get a rocket launcher, a deadly laser gun that uses your suit's energy to fire, a sniper rifle, a buzzsaw gun, and a few more. Each of the weapons are useful, and a lot of it comes down to players' preference on what to use. The trick with the weapons is that you can only carry up to 3 at a time. Also with this, you can upgrade your weapons if you pick up the same weapon that you have with it being at full ammo. If you do this a few times, the gun will improve. You can also pick up these upgrades dropped by dead enemies or ally soldiers to enhance your weapons a full level. So if you really like using a gun, your best bet is to actually not use it, wait till you have a full ammo capacity, and then pick up the same guns that you find early on. It should be noted that when you die, you will lose some of your progress on leveling up your guns. Firing each of the weapons is extremely satisfying. Bits of the robots will fly off along with their heads popping off for headshots. The impact of your hits is enhanced with the sound effects. The limited melee attacks are fun to pull off, but using your melee exhausts all your energy, so you really are put into a vulnerable state. These are cool to use, but not as useful as your other options. Since this is a linear focused game, it does provide a lot of different situations to give you that variety for all the shootouts. There's a few stages that have these walker-like enemies where you can opt to shoot the driver and then use the walker to fire at the robots. One sequence early on has you going down a dark tunnel and you need to protect an APC from damage. Another impressive sequence has you on a tram car shooting flying enemies along with fighting enemies on an adjacent tram. And to add to the spectacle is how the enemy tram will loop over your head. This is simply awesome. Another sequence has you taking a hill from the enemy with you starting at the bottom and then working your way up. You need to avoid hitting some fallen debris along with the enemies. These shifts in situations keeps the action engaging and always propels you to the next great moment. You do get moments to breathe in between these sequences with cutscenes, but like I said before, the story is not worried about development. Its main concern is setting up the next encounter. When it comes to the flaws, I only have a few with this title. There are a handful of situations where I found some enemies and instances to be cheap because they kill you in one hit. These were frustrating, but in many instances you can use your available moveset to outmaneuver them. Boss fights are peppered throughout the game as well, and they usually provide you with either harder foes or larger foes to take out. In many cases, you can target different areas of the bosses and hurt them piece by breaking off their arms or legs. I enjoy these encounters and the flashy action with them, but I do think the fights themselves could have been a bit more dynamic. One addition I would have loved to have seen in Vanquish would to have some type of co-op mode or even a horde mode of some kind. The combat is fantastic, and I think a mode like this would have been a great side option. Another thing to note is that the pacing is fantastic within Vanquish. It is a short and sweet experience that only takes a handful of hours to complete, but the game does not waste a moment of its time on any fluff. Along with that, the game provides a satisfying package while also leaving you wanting more because of how unique the gameplay is. I have found this game to be very replayable because it's a blissful 5 hours that's not a huge time commitment, and every minute of those 5 hours are memorable. Vanquish is truly fantastic. When the developers from Capcom decided to leave and start their own company, that was definitely a risky move. They left the comforts of their company that they knew behind to make something new for themselves. It was important for them to create both great and memorable titles for their first few games to quickly gain the confidence of their audience. Platinumgames released a 1-2 punch with Bayonetta to start the year off strong, and Vanquish to end it strong. At this time in the industry, third-person shooters were huge, and where it would have been easy to create something that would fit that established mold, Shinji Mikami took what was both familiar to the players and added a unique style and flair to it. The use of the thrusters, movement, and slow-mo really did add new dynamics to third-person shooters. While the story is not the strongest aspect of the game, it is charmingly dumb with great presentation. Vanquish is a masterclass in gameplay.